Hi, this is Danny Ryan, and welcome to the Three Will Podcast. I have procured Chris Edwards for your listening enjoyment. He has been quite busy lately.
Yes, very much so.
He's been very busy, so I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. I've been talking to a lot of people about the Jive to SharePoint Migration Tool, so I'm anxious to get an update on sort of what are the things you've been doing recently. You know, maybe hit it at a high level, and then let's dive into some particular things. I know you've added some additional features to it. What's been going on lately?
Yeah, just a lot of activity on the Jive to SharePoint Migration Tool. Lots of things, more so around just refining the process. So not so much the tool.
Okay.
Well, I actually do have quite a bit of updates on the tool, but more of the process about how we go about capturing inventory, really refining the inventory in such a way that people can understand, you know, what is out there in Jive. What do people have that they really care about, and how do they make decisions whether or not a particular Jive place or a collection of Jive content needs to stay or go. So we've done some improvements really with the process to help make some of those decisions, as well as understand when we do move a Jive place, how do we know if we did it correctly? You know, it's like it's great to be able to move content, but when we move content, what if only 50% of it came across?
Yeah.
How do you know that, right? How do you know if 80% of it came across? And if only 80% comes across, is that a big deal or not? You know, do we need to care about those exceptions and care about things that happen? So a lot of more improvements around the tool, really around understanding the process and capturing ins and outs and making sure people are able to make really wise decisions about the content itself.
So it sounds like you have people, you take a look at, you have a way of understanding what's currently in their Jive environment so that they can sort of, because there's part of this process maybe pruning some of it or not moving content over.
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the things that people may want to do is look at when was the last time a place or a particular piece of content within a place. When I say place, I mean, it's a Jive terminology for any kind of container in Jive.
Okay.
So one of the things we were able to expose now is when was something last modified in the context of a place. And, a lot of companies, especially the bigger companies, they want to, have a retention plan in play. They don't want to move stuff over that was last touched more than 2 years ago.
Okay.
So we can now identify that a little bit better than we could before. And really, it may be that they want to archive it. So the way the tool has been designed, and we talked about this last time, is that the tool still maintains the same design where we pull content out of Jive and we store it into either a database and or a file system.
Okay.
So that's kind of the archive, if you will. That's still in play. Whether or not we move it forward, though, that same content, we transform it into something SharePoint can understand and push it into SharePoint, which is our upload piece. We actually have terms for these things now. Then it's crazy how that kind of stuff works, right? We can actually make decisions whether or not something goes to SharePoint or not.
Okay.
And better decisions, not just everything. On top of the process and just being able to kind of measure, what are we doing well? What do we need to, triage? There's exceptions. We're getting timeouts all over the place. How do we go about fixing that? And then minimizing how much redo we have to do. We don't want to have to redo everything if we find an error later on in the process.
Yep.
We want to minimize that. So, we're not billing for that time. We want to make sure we're using our customers' money wisely and really making sure that they can make wise decisions, enabling them, and then also making sure that they get their content in SharePoint and they're happy with what they get. So that's all part of that. We really have made kind of a lot of improvements to the tool with regards to performance and pulling content out of Jive. We've got more of a spec around the tool now.
Okay.
So before it was kind of a loosey goosey. Here are the command lines. Very, very. I thought it was good. I just threw it out there. It was quickly put together. Now we actually sat back and said, okay, what do we really need to be pulling out of Jive? How do we need to control it? Do we need to pull everything? Do we need to pull it by type? Do we need to be able to pull things by maybe something that was last modified by a certain time frame? We can specify these different parameters and really kind of hone in on what we want to pull out of Jive. Okay. We also have added multi-threading to the tool. So now the tool doesn't just go after one place in Jive at a time. It can actually go after a whole collection of them based on how many processors are on whatever server or whatever environment you're running on. It can actually utilize those processors And instead of being restricted by the latency of Jive and just pulling one place at a time, which is extremely slow, we can actually queue up and run multiple pulls from Jive simultaneously.
So do you like on a command line? Do you do like /ludicrous mode?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Luda mode.
Luda mode.
Put it in Luda mode, and it just pulls it all down in 2 seconds. Yeah,
and then that server starts warming up, and it starts
exactly.
Yeah, nice.
You can really see it ripping through stuff. So, and, it's trying to get a balance of, okay, what can we really pull out of Jive? How fast can we pull stuff down without causing it to break as well. So it's kind of trying to get to that balance point,
And this is, so when we're moving over, like a batch of site, we're probably working with the client to decide what's coming over first. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And then once that moves over, because I'm sure there's some remediation on our side. And then there's some, on their side, are they going through and some acceptance of, yes, my content has been moved over properly? Is that what goes on?
Yes. They're typically the customer is responsible for validating their own content. But we put a lot of stuff try to put a lot of stuff in place and really kind of structure the roles for like I said, I'm more of the migration and engineer and tool. I make changes to the tool, but we actually have a migration engineer person now that actually is just running the migrations. That's all that their role is, and they're managing the exceptions and monitoring things before the customer even sees the content.
Okay,
they can help direct. We had a lot of timeouts. Maybe something was going on in Jive. Maybe things were happening at that time. We need to kind of go back through and check to see if any code needs to be modified to fix this, or really identifying kind of patterns and what kind of issues are out there, so we can decide if that has to be redone or not.
Okay.
Before even the customer gets it, and then the customer would get it. We would inform them in more of like a dashboard format or into a regular format where they could say these are the new places that are available. Go in SharePoint. Okay. We'll have a look. If you find issues, then we'll track it, and the migration engineer we'll basically be able to work with the individuals to do that and see do we need to redo things or not. So we've got more of a process. We have to, because we're dealing with a lot more volume of content now. When we originally did the migration tools for ourselves, we only had so much content, and if we had to do manual process, we did it.
We did that. How many years ago did we do that?
2 or 3 years ago.
2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah. So it was the first kind of iteration of the tool itself. And since then, the tool's basically stayed in the same overall form. It's still a console-based tool. It was built that way on purpose to keep it simple.
Well, it's just like JavaScript console apps are coming back.
Exactly. There's no reason not. Why not? Why bring an interface into this if it's not needed? Now, we have found the need for an interface in certain ways of, like, when people want to manage what places go into Jive and dealing with we're dealing with a spreadsheet right now.
That's great. And people are very familiar with working with a spreadsheet as well.
Yeah, it's just it's great, but it's kind of it's unwieldy at the same time. So there'll eventually be some improvements there where we can not be so tied to the spreadsheet, and we can make it a little bit more. At least that's my hope. Make it a little bit more of a user interface on that part of it. Can never guarantee that particular functionality is gonna happen. It really depends on how many people are interested in the tool, how often we use it, and whether or not we really see the bang for doing that.
So when you're doing this, do you you must pull all the user information over first before the content? Is that correct?
Yeah.
Or what's the sort of high level series of what happens?
Yeah. So typically we do and we focus on inventory first. We talked about this a little bit in the last.
You can say something twice with me. I will forget.
Okay.
You don't have actually, if somebody listened to it, you don't have to hit it too hard. But go ahead.
That's cool. So typically we do a get people. We pull the people in Jive first, because everything's dependent on a person. Pretty much even the creation of a place, even the specification of a place. When I say place, in Jive, there's the concept of blogs, spaces, groups, and projects. Those are the kind of the 4 container types. Place is just a generic term for that, so I don't have to keep saying that every time.
Okay.
And essentially we pull the people, we pull the places, and then we pull what's called a metadata run of content. Okay. So we pull the high level of content into our database so we can get content counts. We know kind of at a breadth what's out there, what was last modified in the content at a content level and at a place level. So, and we produce a spreadsheet out of that. We take that and we give that to the customer so they can say, okay, these are the particular places that really have been modified most recently, which ones have not been touched in forever. They have a lot of information, as well as counts, as well as, the size of each of the places. I mean, all that kind of stuff's in this spreadsheet. They can take that and make good decisions. And then we batch it, like you said earlier, into logical chunks. We found that, a logical chunk of like 50 places at a time is a nice focused batch. We may ramp that up, as we really kind of get further into this and work with larger customers. But a batch of 50 at a time seems to be pretty reasonable because you can report updates on those, you can monitor exceptions on those, and it's a consumable amount to say, here customer, here's another batch of 50. Yeah. You can communicate this to your end users, and it seems to be a pretty nice manageable amount. So, and that's pretty much how it works.
And you've got, it sounds like there's a couple of new folks that are working with you. Is that like Lisa and Brandon, or
mainly Lisa?
Okay.
Yep. And then Gary working with us a little bit as well, doing more of the some performance improvements and helping with some of that.
What about are there different content types? Have there been some content type new ones that we're supporting? I know we're giving some estimates for what around blog post may be coming, and what else?
When we originally wrote the tool, it was focused on 3 different containers. I kind of rattled them off earlier. There was the blog, project, group, and space.
Okay.
Well, originally we didn't have blog, was not part of our mix. It wasn't really treated as a kind of a primary content type inside of Jive. We were really focusing on the spaces, projects, and groups. And that really that came over when we originally did the tool for ourselves. I don't think blog as a container type was really even around at the time. So we've been improving the tool. We've got some updates to it to actually include blogs as a primary container type now as well, and bringing over that content as well too. So that's some improvements to the tool. Really making sure we can cover any type of place that's in Jive. We have a story to deal with that. And we focused it on tasks. We pulled discussions. We've actually changed the tool now, so instead of generating pages like wiki pages, things like that for discussions, it actually generates SharePoint discussions. And real threaded SharePoint discussions in SharePoint. So
nice.
It's nice because it can be continued to use as a discussion. So a discussion in Jive can move over to SharePoint and continue to be used as a discussion in SharePoint. And the user information is maintained, the timestamp is maintained, and the whole threaded nature of the discussion is maintained. So that's definitely a super improvement to the tool.
I use discussions. I used one like I think the last time 6 years ago. I mean, it was I don't remember
exactly. It's not.
I don't remember the last. I'm being just upfront. It seems like that's been something that, again, with the overlap between SharePoint and Yammer, more recently is a lot of the discussions go on inside of Yammer.
Right.
But at least this gives you an archive of the content, and you can pick up a Yammer discussion off of it as well. You can
do that.
Refer to it, or
You could use it by its pure nature, or you could use it as a discussion in SharePoint. Yep. So that doesn't really end that. But like you said, it's a great launching point to start from Yammer to say, okay, I want to point to this discussion and continue from there. So it works either way. So it maintains the integrity too of the threaded nature of it and kind of how things were created in Jive. It maps over a little bit better. Before we were doing things where we would create these pages and it was more of a static pull, and wasn't really, you would have to go to something like a Yammer. That was your only option to continue the conversation. Now we have a little bit more of a rich set of options to go continue the conversation. So,
and Jive has the concept of secret groups. How we're handling those as well?
We're actually capturing permissions. So, from in terms of when I say permissions, really we're capturing the users at the place level. So, how many members are in each different Jive places? So we're actually able to capture that detail now in our database. So that's another piece of archive information we have. But we can also play that forward. So, if something was a secret or a private group in Jive, we can actually provision the site in SharePoint, apply the actual permissions in terms of who was a member of what in SharePoint, and then pull in the content. Okay. So that way we're not actually opening up content to folks that shouldn't see it. We're actually able to leverage and move over the people and the people membership references from Jive into SharePoint.
And then those people you'd have to have the acceptance on their side. You'd have to have somebody who has access to the secret group to say, yes, the content's moved over. Is that how do you?
No,
You got a secret group. You moved it over. How do you know?
Secret and private groups in terms of SharePoint, there's really no kind of differences between those.
Okay,
they're basically the same thing.
And so once it's moved over to validate, let's say there's a super secret HR discussion group.
Okay.
3 members in that group that are over in Jive. It gets pushed over into SharePoint. Then you'd have to have one of those 3 people to go and verify that the content did get moved over properly.
Yeah, so as part of that spreadsheet I mentioned earlier, we actually have a list of all those type of users.
Okay.
So, for those highly sensitive places, it's still up to the customer to communicate to their end users when it's time to go look at it. But we don't add users to a site in SharePoint, and unless they were part of the appropriate place in Jive.
So you've added, done some tweaks with multi-threading.
Yes,
and
substantially improved performance.
Okay, so what are we at a high level? Not just at a high level. What does that mean? Like you're moving over a certain number of sites per hour, or what is that?
Well, so just for like the content metadata run, like I talked about earlier, where we just want to not necessarily pull down all the binaries, but we just want to iterate through all the content in Jive. And we've been able to do something that previously took like a day and a half. I've seen it go down to like an hour and a half.
Ooh.
Yeah, so it's substantial difference. In terms
nice.
Yeah. So,
but then the file content will it's dependent upon how quickly the bits go over the.
Pretty quick as well. Quick? Yeah, I've seen. Typically we're pulling down content and all the binaries that come with all that. So pretty much everything. Let's say from a batch of 50, like I talked about earlier.
Sure.
A batch of 50 places. Let's say they're not super large places, but let's say a batch of 50. We pull that down and say like 15 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's. Before that might have taken us, half a day, to do that, just because we're doing it in a very single-threaded way, and there's just a lot of latency there that we're just not taking advantage of the machine that was running the tool. So, we're really trying to take full advantage of the machine and what Jive can actually accept for throughput, and we're able to kind of really trim that down. So, it's important because people are wanting, that are wanting to come off Jive. They want to get off there within a timely manner. They can be a major risk if they're running up against the licensing end date. And they've got a lot of content. We want to be able to get that content down quickly, and be able to kind of know what we're going to do with it.
Is there any plans to? Because I know with Jive you can request a backup. Let's say when you're moving off of Jive, are there any plans for us to, instead of working with our API, to work directly with the backup to do this?
I've done that myself, just poking into the database, but we don't have any plans at the moment that allows us to kind of programmatically look at that.
It might be interesting for us to look at that because APIs change, right?
Sure.
Just in case, like as a backup plan, if they can get the database backup of the whole thing, and
can we pull
the
content out of there and transform it the same way and do something?
Yeah.
So that's one of the nice things. The way we've kind of designed this is that if you could read that database programmatically, then you could basically push it through the same procedures we currently have for the transform piece and the upload. So all that would stay the same.
Yep. And because the reason why I say that is also a backup plan in case, that they're not able to get out in time and we're not able to get everything out. If we can work with the database backup, then that gives an alternative plan for people. So just a thought. I try to come up with.
That's good.
Little thing.
Let's put that on the backlog.
That's probably the worst idea ever. You wouldn't say that to me. Like, Danny, that is the worst idea. You're gonna leave the room, right, and go tell people. Danny said we're gonna.
I can't believe he said that.
No. He obviously hasn't touched Visual Studio in over 7 years. But
it's all good.
It's all good. Thank you.
You know what? It's actually a good idea. I mean, if companies are coming up with that, running into that risk or that restriction. We want to have as many options. It's really one of those things. If people really need it, we'll do it. Probably not going to be something we're going to focus on right now. So
you're now moving over to doing some getting started workshops. I know there's some that we're throwing on your calendar to help out, and I think there's some other folks who are jumping into the fray as well.
Exactly.
To help out. So that's. it'd be good for you just to see a couple, more environments, see what people are doing, and making the tool even better.
Making the tool better, getting other folks kind of familiar with the tool, and really getting their thoughts too on ways it could improve. It's like I said, it was designed quickly, it was put together quickly to accomplish a task, and we've definitely refined it and made it a whole lot better. But that doesn't mean it can be even better. So
a lot of products come from scratching your own back. It's amazing.
It's solving a problem,
yeah,
right?
Solving
That's what it's all
about. Yeah. Anything else before I let you go and don't see you for another quarter? Well, I'll see you at the kickoffs for these things. I'll see you there.
Sure. No, I mean that's the basic gist. I mean, we are putting together some documentation to better define some of the stuff we're talking about. So it's not just me, rattling this stuff off on a call on a recording like this. We're actually going to put together a run book and some details. If someone wanted to pick this up, they could understand it in much more detail.
I get requests all the time from folks in foreign lands asking for this as a product, and I know right now it's still a fluid thing, but maybe I'm not saying we would never package it up as a product, but for right now I think it's best we're doing the services along with it and improving the tool itself until we get it to a point where we're happy with it.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of talked a little bit about, being able to monitor exceptions, things. I mean, I just don't think it's at a state where I'd feel comfortable just handing these off to someone and say, go run it. Yep. And I want to be pretty confident that they're going to be successful with the tool. I wouldn't want to, it definitely requires some hand holding. But, it doesn't mean one day. We'll just have to wait and see what it looks like and what the demand is. And
absolutely.
If it's really going to help someone, we'll make that decision then.
Awesome. Well, I hope everybody enjoyed this, especially if you're looking at moving from Jive to SharePoint. This little update, probably the next time I'll probably just do another update on this. And this really helps me because when people are contacting us, unfortunately, I'm the first line of defense.
I don't know what the
so they're asking. I don't know what it does actually, but at least if we get an update, once a quarter, I kind of can say what it does. But this really helps me out. So thank you for taking the time to do this.
Anytime.
Awesome.
Thanks.
And we have recently added some intro and outro music to our podcast.
Oh, nice.
We're getting there. I'm slowly putting a spit shine on it. It's getting there. But thanks everybody for listening. Please drop by our 3will.com site. You'll see a whole section on migration. Come drop by. Let me know what you're trying to do, what you're trying to migrate from, where you're trying to go. Really appreciate everybody reaching out there. I've had some real good leads come through the website, and we really appreciate you taking the time to reach out. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast, and have a super day. Bye-bye.